America, you still alive? Wake up! Wake up! You still alive? Check for pulse. A slight pulse. Alright, it's still alive, just a little bit. By just a little bit, America survived. Maybe not for long. Alright, so, guess it's time. Post-election 2024, time to get fucked up and talk some shit about politics. Oh, fuck. And so what are the lessons of this brutal electoral turnout? And are we going to learn them? So I guess to answer that second question first, no, of course we're not going to learn. Not the voters, not the partisans, certainly not the party. Just the worst is why this is the worst possible timeline. I mean, for one, we saw Democrats come in on talking about Trump is above the law and he broke all these laws. Trump's going to jail, lock him up, chance and everything. And what happened to that? Does anyone remember that? I mean, we conveniently forget that. The people will say, oh, Trump's going to jail. They'll be laughing so smugly on social media and corporate news. And then what happened? Well, Democrats had the opportunity to lock him up. And what did they do? They didn't lock him up. He's clearly a criminal, but this is the thing, is rich criminals, rich politically connected criminals are above the law in this country. We live in a plutocracy. If you're rich, there almost are no laws for you. I mean, you can run a child sex slave ring for fucking decades and everyone in power can know about it.
And when you're a star, they let you
I don't even know. Why did Epstein end up getting locked up in the first place? I don't even know. I don't know. It's strange because people had talked about it it was a known. And everyone, I mean, whether you're talking Hillary Clinton, Bill Clinton, Donald Trump, was apparently great friends with Epstein. They all knew. And yet, his heinous crimes, it took that long for him to finally end up in jail. And then, I don't know, who knows? Maybe Trump had him killed. Who knows what the hell happened there? Anyway, so this whole idea of no one's above the law, Trump's going to jail when Trump was getting charged. And then what happened? Now he wins the presidency. So it looks like rich people are above the law. The reality is rich people are above the law. If you're rich and politically connected, you were really above the law. And yeah, there might be a rare exception. Maybe you can go too far. But for the most part, that's the rule. And so Democrats were basically running on in 2020 and 2024 on Trump not being above the law, on him being the exception to the rule. They didn't want to overturn the rule because they didn't want their own people to face it.
There is a natural order to this world, and those who try to upend it do not fare well.
Look, what Hunter Biden did with Burisma, it was fucked up. I don't know if it was illegal, but it should have been. I mean, it should have been cause for charge with climate genocide. Fuck, it was a natural gas company using the political connections to the vice president of the United States by giving his son fat checks for nothing in an industry he knows nothing about, is open corruption. And you got to be a total clown to deny it. But, what are partisans but clowns? I don't know. It's red clowns, blue clowns. They're all clowns. And yet they act like they're at each other's throats. But it just seems like another act in the circus. So, of course, Trump didn't go to jail. And, of course, he won again. They didn't punish him when they had the chance. They didn't, because the law doesn't apply to the rich. They didn't, whether it's Merrick Garland or every step of the way. And then the way Fani Willis just bungled her prosecution, which should have been simple, but she had to start fucking her, or she had to hire the guy she was fucking. I don't know what order it went down in, but what was that? I mean, that was just stupid, but then that's just the kind of incompetence the kind of just stupid, selfish, personal incompetence that is so typical of the Democratic Party. I mean, I wish I could act surprised about any of this. Are Dems learning anything? Are the Democrats going to learn anything from this? That's kind of the big question here is, are we going to learn anything? And it looks like not. I mean, right now, for their excuses, the Democratic Party seems to be leaning into identity politics, saying that people didn't want to vote for her because she's a black woman, saying things like, this is who we are. Instead of looking at the economy and saying no, this is who we are. People who can't afford a house. People who can't afford a roof over their head. People who can't afford to fucking eat, man.
It's the economy, stupid.
What the fuck do you mean this is who we are? You are not who we are, dude. You're sitting here making $1 million to talk shit on MSNBC. Some fucking scumbag. What the fuck do you know, dude? You haven't been in the reality for the poor and working class in this country ever. So that was what was amazing about this. Really, this election was the poor and working class swinging Republican. And that only points to one thing, which is just the total failure of the Democratic Party on this. This was the one thing they were supposed to have right. And what did they do? They went corrupt. They swung to the right. They didn't want to be right. They wanted to be right wing. They wanted to split the difference with Republicans, make it easy for themselves, do what donors wanted, keep moving to the right, purge their party at anyone who questioned the party line if it was possible, and then act shocked at what happens. At the end of the day, if we're going to move forward on this, we're going to need solidarity. Maybe not with the Democratic Party, but the people who, in better circumstances, would all vote for the Democratic Party. We need solidarity as opposed to identity politics. Because if we keep dividing ourselves on identity politics like this, we're never going to come together for the real battles. And I'm not saying racism, sexism aren't real and that we shouldn't, where they're real and institutional and codified, we shouldn't work to change that. But I mean, we saw it with this. We saw it with, more women and more non-white people switching to Trump this election. These aren't as cut and dry as anyone peddling identity politics wants it to appear to be. I mean, identity politics just kind of is just the me politics. It's all focused on me. When has it really ever helped anything? I mean, even the Black Lives Matter movement. Okay, so we made millionaires of some of the quote-unquote leaders of the movement. And then in 2023, we have more police murders than ever. I mean, we haven't really seen any fundamental changes. We had a defunding of the police movement. And then we had the slow withdrawal, or the fast withdrawal of that defund the police movement as people turned against it, whether it's successful or not. I mean, crime is generally down. So, no, we don't need this many police. But a lot of this just comes down to messaging on part of the left, anyone who sees themselves as part of this movement, and the Democratic Party. And yet Democrats don't care. So this thing is, when they co-opt your movement, they're most likely going to destroy its brand, like they did with BLM, and even the Pride flag. Those are almost just like Democratic Party flags at this point. And you're going to lose a lot of people automatically who you might have on the issue if you talked about it in a rational way. But does any of that matter? Probably not, dude. What matters is me. Everyone wants their podcast, their social media posts, their segment on MSNBC where they're going to be all self-righteous. Everyone wants their outrage points. And, we know all this dynamic. Social media has primed us for it. And so here we are. Identity politics, but everyone's just... It's just tribalism, amplified. And that's the opposite of solidarity. And we're not going to get through this without solidarity. This whole idea Democrats won't accept that this was about the economy, the hugeness of the loss should make it glaringly apparent. And yet, they're still leaning into identity politics and denial, saying maybe Harris should have run to the right. How could she run more to the right? She was up against Mussolini at that point, dude. She's going to be... You just want her to run to the right of Trump on every single issue? What's the point? On some level, you have to ask, what's the point of having two parties? Why don't Democrats and Republicans deal with their differences in the primary of the GOP? Why don't you leave the Democratic Party to people who are actually going to look out for the working class and the poor and the future of this planet? And, you right-wing corporatists who believe in absolutely fucking nothing are, let's just be real, genocidal, fascist as fuck, racist as fuck. I know, I've been talking about identity politics, but this genocide in Gaza has been openly racist. There's no other way that they would have allowed this to continue. It's
people
just that,
based upon their ethnicity and their religion. That's called genocide. Genocide. That's what it is. And now, even in our move to state what our vital interest is, this administration and others who support it are afraid to use the word. We're told we're not taking sides. I'm here to take 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 sides.
And so the thing the corporate media keeps wanting to avoid is any mention of the economy and economic stress factoring into this. One thing Democrats are saying to themselves now that this is largely because it's not because of the actual economy, because some of the metrics are great. Unemployment is low. The stock market's all-time high. What are you crying about? Because these people are so wealthy, they don't fucking care about anything. They really, I don't know. Maybe, are they that much in denial? Are they that much, they don't care if they openly lie? Or are they really that ignorant because of their privilege? Who knows? And so a lot of Democrats just want to say that it's the perception of the economy thanks to right-wing media. Even if that was true, that is an implication of the Democratic Party in the way that they've failed to even try to impact culture. When culture really has a moment, like with the Black Lives Matter movement, like with identity politics, the Democrats want to capitalize on that culture, but they don't compel that initial shift. They don't come from a point of moral high ground. No, they want to they'd want to jump up to the moral high ground and drag that down to their level and stand on it as a soapbox during their re-election campaign. And so they haven't really put in any resources into anything other than their own echo chamber. I mean, they'll put, MSNBC's got plenty of resources, and CNN and others, maybe Pod Save America and some shit like that. But the right-wing media ecosystem, especially online, is just vast. And there's nothing like it on the Democratic side, much less anything left-wing. I mean, there's nothing that stands up to it. There are a few, we've got a few pillar Democracy Now! There's a handful of decent scattered podcasts, but there's nothing like the cohesive ecosystem that the right has. So blaming the realities of the economy on perception of the economy is fucked up, just being purposely very blind to reality, and is going to certainly not help, and doesn't suggest that they're ever going to get any better, which is a problem because, again, the Democratic Party is very incestuous. And so, if you're going to want to change it from the outside, like, good luck. It's not going to work. We don't have time. It's going to take like 15, 20 years, at least, probably more. Like, because this thing is, we see the Democrats holding on to power until they die. Nancy Pelosi is going to be in the House until she dies. Just like Feinstein was in the Senate until she died in office. These people are all dying in office, just like Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Even Bernie probably will, but at least, if he wants to. He shouldn't have to, but if he wants to, he deserves it. But the rest of these clowns, like, they've just been corrupt, right-wing pieces of shit for decades, and then they're going to hold on to that, and they're going to hold on to their office with their cold, dead hands until we literally got to pry their corpse out of their seat in the House floor. And then we'll elect somebody when everything's way too late, when climate collapse is way too late, when fascism's fully taken over. It's insane. And so this isn't really helpful to look at, but it's crazy. So I'm just going to point it out for anyone who might have missed it. So like Simone Sanders said, it was a stab in the face to call for Biden to quit. And a lot of people didn't want Biden to quit. AOC, a lot of seemingly decent politicians thought that Biden shouldn't have stepped down after his disastrous debate performance this summer. But what's wild is at the time, Biden's internal polling said that Trump would win at least 400 electoral votes, at least according to an Obama aide. But, of course, Biden's inner circle, like as any cult would do, which is the irony of calling MAGA a cult, when Blue MAGA is just as much a cult. Blue MAGA calling MAGA a cult is just the Spider-Man meme. Except one's blue, one's red. It's wild. This cultish thinking, this bubble of insular thinking in the Democratic Party, and that's just it's how the entire party operates. They are in such a bubble. Even if they're on MSNBC, they might have millions of viewers every night, but they still live in a bubble, an absolute bubble, and that makes it even more dangerous because they're speaking from a place of complete ignorance to the masses. So that causes its own problems, like people being very shocked and depressed and surprised that Harris lost by a lot when they shouldn't be shocked and surprised at all, honestly. A strange reality in American politics that Democrats just, in this bubble, just refuse to accept is that voters are way more progressive than the politicians they elect, even on the Democratic side alone. We saw that with a lot of the state ballot referendums across the country this time, which is honestly wild. I think there were 7 states that voted to protect abortion rights. There were, polls show time and time again, and ballot referendums show time and time again that voters support more progressive policies. This isn't even really up for debate. Even climate policies. Voters will say that they support climate action, and maybe a politician will convince them to oppose it or not. But at the end of the day, if that initial impulse is there, like, that's what we really need. And yet, do we ever capitalize on it? No. Why not? Because the Democrats are the other party. Democrats are the opposition to the Republican Party. Republicans aren't going to fucking do it. So that's why we have to be harsh on the Democratic Party. On some level, we have to ask ourselves, is there a way for this party to rearrange itself to go forward, or should it just be destroyed? Should it just be merged with the Republican Party at this point? Should we invade every single local meeting of the Democratic Party and just make them a completely untenable party? Make it so they can't even just use massive direct action and civil disobedience to totally disrupt the Democratic Party at every level until they can cease to function as a party, and hope that they do, and that we can thereby gain an opening to have another party. I don't know, an end of the world party, anything. Because if they're not going to learn, then there's no point in doing this. There's no point even talking about this or thinking about any of this shit ever again. Certainly no point in voting. But at the end of the day, this is the 800-pound gorilla that's in the room with all of us at the end of the world. So at the end of the world, do you want the 800-pound gorilla to be nice and sane, or do you want it to be an insane, psychopathic fascist owned by the greediest, most insecure, privileged, rich kid you've ever known?
Yourself.
I mean, this year, the same election that Harris handily lost, 3 states, including 2 where Trump won by a lot, rejected school voucher programs. 7 codified supported abortion rights. Even in Florida, well, they need 60% to pass ballot referendums, which is fucked up and anti-democratic, of course. So yeah, that's Florida for you. You need 60%, but they got almost enough to protect abortion and legalize marijuana in that state. They almost got 60% on both of those. I mean, I think they were within 10% of each, over 50%. So realistically, like Florida, in a true democracy, Florida would have just legalized weed and abortion. But that's not what we live in. We definitely don't live in a democracy. So, but that's what the voters say. Like, look, in the same election, they voted overwhelmingly for Donald Trump. So Democrats, I don't get how Democrats don't sit down and ask themselves, how the fuck do you square this circle? How does all of this make sense? And especially the ones who say that they didn't go far enough to the right. But I mean, you turn on cable news and you'll see some Republican consultant telling Democrats they didn't move far enough to the right. And you're like, bitch, you're a Republican. But at the same time, it's scary because Democrats will listen to them. Because the only people Democrats listen to are Republicans. That's why they touted the whole Cheney endorsement shit. It's because they're like, oh, look, this is proof that we're the great leadership that America wants. The Cheneys support us. Even the Cheneys. The wonderful Cheneys protecting democracy. Like, what? Jesus Christ. Oh, man. I don't know. It doesn't even get worse than this. I don't fucking know. Yeah, so if you're depressed over this election, like, fuck, you should be. But you should have been fucking 10 years ago. You should have seen this shit coming. As soon as they fucked over Bernie Sanders in 2016, you should have seen, well, the future is one path and one path only. Every 4 years, they're going to choose to paint the next 4 years blue or red, but it's the same path. Fuck. And there was a YouGov poll in the weeks before Election Day where they didn't tie policies to candidates. And of course, look, every fucking poll. Yeah, YouGov poll a couple weeks before the election. If you put progressive policies and don't tell anyone who supports it and ask them what they support, yeah, people will vote for progressive policies. But then you tie them in with party. And at the end of the day, though, the Democrats, since they aren't really progressive, it's like you don't really have anyone to vote for if you want progressive policies. Who do you vote for? Third party to lose over and over again. This isn't a new thing. We've known this has been a through line for ever since I've paid attention to politics. Voters are always more progressive than the politicians they elect, and the politicians were offered even in just the Democratic Party. So to say that the Democratic Party ran too far to the left is crazy, because Democrats want someone more to the left than that, and they can't get it because Democrats block it. And so what happens? When people have that disaffection and that frustration, well, what the fuck, dude? Guess what? You get someone like Donald Trump, a fucking wrecking ball to our democracy. People will vote for it because our democracy is a fucking wreck. And they will say, well, what are you going to do? Let's demolish it. Like, what hope is there at this point? I don't know. I don't fucking know.
Don't give a shit about the temperature in Guatemala. Don't really see what all the fuss is about. Ain't gonna worry about no future generations, and I'm sure somebody gonna figure it out. Don't try to tell me how some power can
I guess first off, we'll get it out of the way since it's boring.
No one cares.
What does this presidential election mean for climate now that Trump's coming back in? And honestly, you'll hear a lot of fear-mongering about this, but the reality is probably not much, since Democrats really shot their shot with the Inflation Reduction Act, calling it the greatest climate bill in history. And it wasn't a climate bill, and it was a shit climate bill, if it was. And it did some good things, don't get me wrong, but it's also very misleading because a lot of Democrats' climate strategy focuses on increasing drilling, increasing production, as you'll hear from Obama, from Biden, from Harris, when they're on the campaign trail, when they're going up against a Republican. They will brag about their record oil and gas production and export numbers. Like, we're not burning them on the same planet. Like, I don't know who they think they're fooling here. Obviously just voters. They just think they're fooling voters. And maybe they are. And to a large degree they are. I mean, look at Carbon Brief. Look at the carbon. If you've probably seen, if you're on climate Twitter, you've probably seen Carbon Brief's nice little chart of the difference in the trajectory of our U.S. carbon emissions with a Biden presidency versus a Trump one. And of course, it looks like a huge difference, and it's very scary and all, but the reality is all that difference is probably going to be made up by our exports under Democrats. And so they just count that under another ledger. That's a different country's carbon emissions. We just cracked it. We just sent it over there. We just made the money off it. That has nothing to do with us. This is like the heroin dealer acting like the overdoses have nothing to do with him. And this is... So, I think that chart is just disingenuous and also is based on a lot of faulty expectations about what the Inflation Reduction Act will achieve. A lot of them thanks to Rhodium Group, Princeton University, Jesse Jenkins, shout out, because they just had insane expectations. And part of that expectation was that Republicans would never gain control of the White House or Congress in the meantime, and their courts wouldn't get in the way. I mean, this is part of the problem with Democratic legislation is they always seem to presume that, Republicans will either go along with it or will never take control again on the federal level. And it's like, of course they're gonna. So plan that in your legislation, for fuck's fucking sake, dude. Make something. I mean, my argument here would have been, this is why we should have gone with a climate tax, a fee and dividend carbon tax. Been saying this for a decade and a half, and it used to be, for a little while it gained a little bit of steam, and then it just kind of died away. And then I've even heard leftist climate activists seeming to take issue with the fee and dividend carbon tax. Climate scientists get out of their role sometimes when they want to dip into politics because they don't know shit about politics. They don't understand how fucked up the Democratic Party is because all they focus on is how fucked up the Republican Party is. And it's like, yeah, that's a nice distraction, but at the end of the day, the laws of physics don't care. They don't care if it's red emissions, blue emissions.
It'll start getting cooler. You just watch.
I wish science agreed with you.
Especially with Democrats seeming to just give in to the agricultural industry. I mean, even the IRA and different climate initiatives under Biden gave money to dairy farmers, to animal agriculture, for very non-climate friendly enterprises, profit-seeking enterprises, just because they can't fight it, apparently. No Democratic politician has the balls to stand up and say that, look, we need to reduce our meat consumption, or we're not going to make it climate-wise. Not without some magic wand, which, I don't know, maybe Elon Musk is going to invent a magic wand. Maybe we're going to have the Tesla magic wand. It's going to suck all the carbon emissions from the atmosphere, but that's what we're banking on, carbon capture and sequestration, and it's bullshit. Like, it should be so obviously bullshit. And so, according to some of the early, I'm not sure what this new Carbon Brief, well, it's not even a new chart. What the Carbon Brief chart showing the differences between Trump and Biden administrations in terms of climate would be, I'm not sure how much they take into account the realities in between of the initial projections from the Inflation Reduction Act and how much they would reduce emissions. I mean, if you remember when it first got rammed through, just like a surprise present, the media was talking about, because of the Rhodium Group, Jesse Jenkins, Princeton University, and all those cheerleaders, we're talking about by 2030, we're going to reduce U.S. carbon emissions by 40%. And, of course, the liberals clapped and went back to brunch. They were happy to hear that. They didn't have to pay attention to anything again. Planet was saved. Thank God. But so much of that was just completely insane. I mean, they had insane expectations for carbon capture by then, which at this point we're like halfway there and not seeing it at all. So there's that chunk of it. And on top of it, now we've got, we had the obvious roadblocks of different things like the transmission's going to be hard to build, which the Inflation Reduction Act, really, it did help with all the things we need to help with. But that's the thing is, it's like eating healthy if you're a heroin addict. Like, yeah, of course it's better, I guess. But you still need to get off heroin. You still need to get off the fentanyl. You can't just eat healthy and, be shooting up fentanyl all day, every day and act like, well, this is a healthy lifestyle. No, this is not a good long-term plan. Like, you need to get off the fentanyl. Eating raw vegan, that's great, but you still got to get off the fentanyl, bro. That's kind of the big issue here. Because then what happens? Jevons paradox kicks in. And just like we saw, which you could almost have expected, is AI data centers are basically coming for all the renewable energy gains we've ever made. Because there is no upper limit to the energy demand of AI data centers. That's the difference between it and things like Bitcoin mining or something. And different forms of consumption. There's at least some point where every other way that we consume energy, it's like, okay, it starts to level off or it has a ceiling. It's not going to go beyond there. Whereas with AI, the more energy you put in, the more computation power, the more it can compute, the more your AI can do. And what's the upper limit? Like, where does AI, when is AI no longer useful? When is it too intelligent to be efficient? Like, no, as far as we can see, there is no horizon line where there's an upper limit of AI energy use. And of course, how has the Biden administration addressed this since the IRA has passed? This insatiable need for energy by the AI and data center industries?
Today, it's another example of the private sector optimism. Microsoft, as the president already pointed out, is investing $3.3 billion to build a new data center here in Racine. That's going to help operate one of the most powerful artificial intelligence systems in the world. It's going to result in 2,300 union construction jobs. It's to build with this.
And so Trump is already looking like he's bringing a lot of deregulation, trying to drill as much as possible, just like he promised. And so why wouldn't that be worse for climate, obviously? Well, it's because of economics. Basic, simple economics. If more supply is going to bring down the price. If he oversupplies the market and creates a huge, especially liquid natural gas glut, which is a lot of our export, we put too much on the market, which there's already a lot. We've been flooding the market already. And, this is what Biden and Harris and Obama and Trump, after his first term, bragged about. Increasing liquid natural gas exports. At some point, that's going to depress the production end of this. And so it's going to backfire. And, this weird problem is all because we don't have a sane climate policy. We don't really have a carbon tax. We don't have any kind of limit on carbon emissions at all. Democrats didn't put one forth and apparently never will. And so this is one of the weird ironies and reasons why, Democrats are so shitty on this that Trump might not be able to be that much worse.
The liquid gold that we have under our feet, liquid gold, it's oil and gas, sometimes referred to as oil and gas. JD, I think we're going to have to keep him away from the oil and gas. What do you think, Howard? Yes?
One of the things that always just tripped me out was the way Democrats always want to talk about gas prices and play into this game of talking about gas prices, trying to lower gas prices. Like, this is really one of Americans' biggest expensive, especially now that you can buy a smaller car that does better on gas. You can get a hybrid. You can get there's so many EVs and hybrids out. There are more options now, and a lot of people are not paying as much. They're not needing as much gas as they used to, for whatever reason that is. But at the same time, people who choose to still can. If you want to buy a stupidly big truck that you can put your old truck in the back of, yeah, and then you can complain about gas prices while you pull up to your McMansion. Instead of calling out that ridiculousness of focusing on gas prices like this is the main factor impacting the poor and working class in this country, not things like food and housing. When Democrats will focus on this and brag about low gas prices. That was insane. Low gas prices are a bad thing for climate. We are not going to survive as a species with low gas prices. We've known this for decades. This is not like some revelation that got handed down or something. This is not something new that we're still learning to digest as a society. No, we know this. High gas prices means people use less gas. It compels people to move towards hybrids, electric vehicles, alternatives, public transit. The things that we need to do to survive as a species. And so, one irony of Trump was, I'm looking at climatepower.us. So I think this is one of those liberal, like super democratic, not just liberal, but super democratic Al Gore type affiliated climate groups in the US that is over and over on some bullshit. So yeah, October 16th this year. Fact check. Trump raised oil prices on Americans to bail out big oil by cutting a deal with Putin and OPEC. So yeah, basically Trump cut a messed up deal with OPEC to increase oil prices, after there was a price war between Russia and Saudi Arabia. But that's a good thing for climate. I get that that's bad for that, that's harder for the poor and working class, and in some ways a little bit. But it's nowhere near as bad as inflation's been the last few years as far as housing and food inflation, which are a much bigger percentage of the average and poor working class income. But here's the thing is you'll have Trump doing stupid shit like this just out of corruption, out of whatever reason he did this for. I don't know if he did it for Russia, for Putin, for Saudi Arabia, for himself, for Jared Kushner, for his investors, his donors, just for the general investor class in general. Who knows? But raising oil and gas prices, we need that. Like, we need to do that. Sorry, gas should be nearly prohibitively expensive. Obviously, we need a transition period, but like, look, we should have already fucking been there. This is 2024, and we're still talking about shit like it's the 90s, and we've learned nothing. Jesus Christ. So yeah, there's climate power, shilling for a party that brags about record oil and gas production. So clearly, we're in a good place, America. We always were. If there's any trouble that comes out with the climate in the next couple of years, it's all because of Donald Trump and the Republicans. Don't blame Democrats at all. No introspection allowed. No, it's all Trump. So yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I guess, who would have been worse on climate? It's hard to tell in the big picture because more than the next 4 years are going to matter, and the next 4 years are going to impact more than the next 4 years. It's hard to say. I mean, we can't just keep kicking the can down the road, bragging about having the lesser evil party brag about record oil and gas production and still act like this is somehow beneficial on climate. I mean, we're just so off the farm on here. I don't even know what to say. Like, it's over. The planet's been over. I don't know. No one's trying. No one's tried. No party is trying. Not the greater evil, not the lesser evil. The lesser evil is trying to help the greater evil get more evil. And here we go. Now we got that. And they're all despondent, but I think it's just an act because at the end of the day, Democrats are going to get a lot of money. They're going to raise a shit ton of money off of this Trump election, just like they did in the last one. And that's one of the perverse incentives involved here, but I'm not ready for that. So there's this mistaken belief among the climate concerned community that Democrats in the United States are significantly more serious and concerned with global warming, climate change than Republicans, and that they actually believe in it and care about it to some degree. And I just want to do what I can to disabuse you of that notion. It took me a while to accept too, but the reality is I spent a few years around a lot of Democrats, and I can't even count on one finger the number of times they unprompted really seem to care and know and say anything about climate change. It got a rare, offhand, occasional remark just to bash Republicans. They certainly never once treated it as the complex existential threat that it is. And the reality is they just showed that they don't care and they don't know because they don't care and don't care because they don't know. It just, how little they understand the issue tells how little they care. Story time! Story time. So it's probably 2017-ish. I was knocking doors for John Ossoff's campaign for Congress, and one day staff said he was going to come into the office and we would each be able to ask him a question. So me and all my progressive friends, of course, we hit him with something. And so, of course, I asked him about fee and dividend carbon tax. And so John Ossoff, he's a smart guy. He's an educated guy. He's a little bit younger than me, which means he has more skin in the game in climate. So you would think he's going to see more. He's got great healthcare and he's younger than me. He should live longer than me. He's going to see more of the climate collapse than I am. He's going to experience more of this future world. You would think he would care a little more. And he went to the London School of Economics. He should know what a fee and dividend carbon tax is. And yet when I said it, it looked like his eyes glazed over. I don't know if he went into politician campaign mode and his brain just shut down, or if he literally had never heard the term or wasn't familiar with it. But he just, of course, immediately pivoted to Obama-era Democrat campaign speak about the Paris Agreement. We need to hold to the Paris Agreement. But that doesn't mean anything. It's the Paris Agreement. So it was obvious that he didn't really care and couldn't really, like, the Paris, that has nothing to do with congressional policy, really. Like, we're talking about the Paris Agreement goals are like the end state. And so fee and dividend carbon tax or anything, any kind of climate policy would be how you get to the goals that we supposedly aim for in the Paris Agreement. And so when I asked him about it, he just blanked out and pivoted to a talking point about the Paris Agreement. And it was, I can't say I was surprised, but it was a little, like, I guess, depressing and enlightening at the same time. Well, like enlightenment usually is. But yeah, and in my experience of the Democratic Party, that's pretty much standard. Actually, that's about the best you can hope for. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if half the Democratic Party doesn't even know what the fucking Paris Agreement, the vaguest conception of the Paris Agreement, or even know what it is if you just say the phrase. I don't even know if they would be able to link it to climate. That is how off the farm these people are. They are not going to save us. They're not going to save this planet the way things are right now. So honestly, the climate movement needs to get this idea out of their heads that Democrats are somehow honestly worth fighting for. Like, for the most part, they're not. The ones that are worth fighting for are getting targeted by the rest of them and stripped out of their seats. I mean, Jamal Bowman, one of the strongest backers of the Green New Deal, however vague and whatever problems there might be with that, he still fully supported it. He was in line with the Sunrise Movement, close to some climate activists, and they purged him because he opposed genocide. So... And they're coming after Rashida Tlaib, and they're going to go after the last of the decent progressives that are some of the most serious people. And I don't know how much the progressives really understand it, the nuance of it, but they get that it's serious, and they will do a lot more, and they will listen to the people who know and care, and the climate activists, Sunrise Movement people, the Green New Deal people. Like, the progressives will listen to them, and yet there's only a few of them in Congress, and they're all getting purged by the same Democratic Party that's supposed to be the party that takes climate change seriously. After all, they believe in climate change. Doesn't belief itself lower emissions, or at least don't you feel better about the imminent demise of all life on Earth because Democrats believe in the science? It's the power of belief. One lesson here, though, at the macro political level from someone who has knocked thousands of doors on political campaigns. Honestly, I don't trust anyone who talks about politics and hasn't knocked on thousands of doors talking to voters, because you don't really know what people think about politics. And then I'm not saying it's terrifying. It's crazy, but it's enlightening to listen to people and to learn what they think about what is going on, and to learn how much that differs from the narratives we're fed on corporate media, that where they pretend to know what we're thinking. And yet it's pretty hilarious. Of course, these people don't know what the fuck the work, like when you were walking through a working class neighborhood, knocking on every door, closely packed in an apartment or some tiny houses. Like, no, these consultants, these rich millionaire pieces of shit on MSNBC, they don't know fuck all about what reality is in America. So it's kind of hilarious. But one of the things is Democrats have typically been able to focus on door knocking and getting out the vote and canvassing to have leverage over Republicans, because this is where we really do better, because we have young people. And we can talk about, Democrats can typically talk about their policies in more detail without sounding like psychopaths, without making it clear that we don't believe anything and we're going to fuck people over and we don't know anything. And especially for progressives, it's been knocking doors. And this is how AOC said she won, by knocking doors early. This is how I helped Democrats in this area flip districts that have been long held by Republicans with just a handful, not a lot of money, no institutional support from the state party. Thanks, Stacey Abrams. No institutional support from the state party. Just 1 or 2 dozen people knocking a bunch of doors for what should be minimum wage, and doing it for a candidate they half believe in, at least half. And you turn out the vote. You can flip a district. You can win elections like that. But the problem here is Democrats did so much door knocking in 2024, and I guarantee they had I'm not going to look at the numbers here, but I'm sure they had a massive advantage over Republicans when it came to one-on-one trying to get out the vote tactics. The problem is when you don't have the policies to really back that up, especially trying that over and over and over again, you will lose. You need the policies. You need to be able to engage deeply on anything with these voters. And that's part of the problem. So I worked some for the Ossoff campaign, knocking doors on his congressional campaigns. Knocked a lot of doors there, and it was pretty crazy because at that point it was the most expensive congressional race in history. And so we knocked every door, like multiple times, every door in Vote Builder. We were knocking to the point where we would piss people off because we were annoying them so much. And the campaign couldn't see it, and the top down couldn't see it. They didn't care. It literally got to the point where we were losing votes by knocking on doors. And part of it was because we didn't have the policies to back up the votes we were trying to get. We didn't have the intellectual policy, the thoughtful, philosophical, political substrate to really go to all these doors and be like, look, you should vote for us. And as a person, it was easy for me to go and just be honest. I would try to turn out votes because, look, Karen Handel who was at the election I worked on. She was the Republican congressman. She was a straight up demon from, I don't know, the 8th layer of hell. I'm not sure. Point is, she was we knocked on so many doors, we were losing votes. And so there's really, if you don't have the policies to back up your strategy and tactic of knocking on every single door and having one-on-one conversations with people, like, look, just having the money to knock on those doors and have all those conversations, to call all those phones, to make all those texts, have all those conversations. If you don't have the policies to back up that entire operation, then it's not going to work. And that was one, I guess that's the other silver lining of this, that I'm sure Democrats won't learn from it anyway, but if Democrats could learn, this would be one of the silver linings of this election turnout. And yet I don't think they can, so I don't know. But at the end of the day, if you're going to get up to vote, if you're going to go knock on the door, make a phone call, text somebody, it has to be paired with smart politics, a convincing argument, and proof that you're going to act to back up whatever you claim to believe in when you get in power. Because once you get in power and you don't fulfill your promises that you made on the campaign trail, like Obama promising to codify Roe v. Wade when he had a supermajority in 2009, but Democrats didn't all support abortion then, so we've got an excuse. Guess what? That shit doesn't really fly now that we lost the fucking right to abortion. When just a few years ago, Nancy Pelosi, Clyburn, the Democratic establishment, all these same cocksuckers lined up to support Henry Queller in Texas. And this isn't even the only one, but this is just an example. To support Queller in Texas, total fucking oil and gas, right-wing scumbag piece of shit in a Democratic primary. This is the thing, they show up in the primaries to beat progressives, to beat out a Latina progressive in Texas in a primary. They showed up for this anti-abortion, pro-oil, piece of shit, quote-unquote Democrat, uppercase D Democrat. And then Roe v. Wade is overturned. They want to act like this is all your fault for not voting for us. They never believed in this shit in the first place. Do not let the Democratic Party gaslight you. Do not fucking let the Democratic Party machine gaslight you now. You've seen what happened. We've all seen what happened. These freaks, they don't believe in anything. Let me guarantee you that. They don't believe in anything. So, and yet they're what we have to work with. We have two parties. Are you gonna go vote Republican? You're gonna go vote for Trump? Like, some people will, obviously. And at bottom, maybe we'll learn that there is diminishing returns in spending money on get out the vote, voter outreach and operations when you don't have the policies to back up those same kind of operations, when there's no reason for those voters to support your policies, and when you can't even back them up, and when you can't even be sure that you believe them in the first place. I mean, just like Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris is like a political weather vane. What does she think will benefit her in the moment? Well, that's what she believes now, and she's going to campaign on it. And the wind blew a different direction. Now she believes something else. There is no foundation. There's no political, ideological, intellectual, philosophical, ethical foundation for this party, this candidacy, this administration at all. And they never even pretended to offer that. And they just thought they could make up for it with money. And now they're in debt. They spent $1 billion.
I am proud of the race we ran.
Money in politics in the United States. That's the big issue. Whether you care about climate, whatever the fuck you care about. So I've always wondered, if there was a point where spending money in politics, which, let's be clear about one thing first. When you spend money in politics, you're not just buying a politician. It's not like you're buying a politician on the auction. No, what you're doing is typically media spending. You're spending money on propaganda. And if that propaganda gets your person elected, well, then now you've got influence relative to how much you spent. So this all comes down to media spending. This is why the influence of money in politics blew up after the age of newspapers. Look, in the age of newspapers, yeah, it was hard to compete with that, with the printing press and stuff. But then at some point, people could organize and print their own leaflets and things and organize against that. But then we had TV. Money in politics blew up during that period. And why? Because you could spend so much more money on ad spending. And, same with radio and everything, and the expansion of radio. But then you get to the internet and the age we're in now, where everything can be an ad. Look at Instagram. All these quote-unquote influencers are just advertisers. That's all they are. They're just human advertisements. They're human billboards. And all the ads in between. It's all about advertising. And this is where all that money in politics goes. And this is where all that leverage comes from. And this is where that capacity for all that money to have that influence comes from. It's not like this is going into the bank account of these politicians. Like, this is going into these ad spending, whether it's on CNN or YouTube. And trust me, I know, because I made some money on some of this shit in my normal job this election season. And it's good money. And it was easy to see, okay, based on what I'm getting, you're spending a shit ton on TV and web advertising. I even knew people who saw the ads I worked on YouTube and got annoyed by them. So, you know, to the last point, you know, I've always wondered, is there a saturation point where money is so much saturated in whatever political agenda and political operations, where money so saturates that it no longer delivers or has diminishing returns or negative returns even? And I think that's where we've kind of reached. And yet the Democratic Party doesn't understand that. The lesser evil party that was supposed to be opposed to money in politics, is so off the farm on that understanding that they are still ravenously clamoring for every single campaign dollar they can get, and just messaging. And this is the whole part of this election, is a lot of the Democratic establishment wants to focus on messaging here. This wasn't just a messaging issue. Like, if you're worried about paying your rent, if you're homeless, if you can't afford to eat, if you go to sleep hungry every night, the messaging isn't the problem. There's no way to fucking message this economy to fix the hunger, the pain in your belly, to put a roof over your head. And messaging doesn't do any of that. These are actual practical economic realities that Democrats should have addressed. And I told them, as soon as Biden came in, especially before the midterms, I thought the midterms would be worse. I thought the midterms would look more like this. The midterms were more mixed. Here we are. That's because most people don't vote in the midterms. Most people vote in the general elections. And so here we are with an absolute fucking blowout, because people have been so ignored. Hungry people, homeless people, people struggling, people worried about economic struggle, even people who have too much, don't need all the shit they have. They still have this fucked up psychological impulse of they need more, or they might not have enough, or they might lose it. And because we have no social safety net. We have no social safety nets for people. So this anxiety, even for the rich, makes sense. For the pretty well off makes sense. And yet, what do Democrats do on that? They say it's because of messaging. They dismiss it. They point to the stock market, record stock market. Doesn't that fill your belly? How can we have record homelessness with an unemployment rate like this?
Hello, my beautiful America. This is President Beat, and it's time we had a talk. It's time we discuss something rather important. The issue at hand is, well, my presidency. The question has been raised, I know, as to just how I came to be elected to this most illustrious office, or whether or not I had been elected at all. To that I must answer, of course. Of course I was elected, sweet America. Of course. Isn't the right to vote the very foundation of a democracy? Fortunately, in the interest of national security, I'm not at liberty to discuss the details of the election. You understand. But rest assured, I am your president.
Okay, so I know I said a little bit ago that there was a bright side of this fucked electoral turnout, but maybe not so much. See, you know, one of the big points was that Democratic voter turnout was down, and while that's true nationwide, it's actually not true in a lot of the key swing states. Wisconsin, Michigan, Georgia, Pennsylvania, I think, all had record high voter turnout. And we're all swing states that went for Trump. And so one depressor in states that are pretty solid is that people just feel like their vote doesn't matter because of the Electoral College, and they know how their state's going to go. And we all know that's a very real effect. So yeah, this is one of the big risks of the Democratic Party consistently moving to the right, even in campaigns that it loses. When the Democratic Party moves to the right, they are literally running cover for the right. They are running cover for Republicans. They are legitimizing these insane ideas that the Republicans have that have no basis in reality and are more based in just wanton cruelty as political policy. And yet it works because Democrats are so corrupt and keep chasing them to the right every single time. And so they keep dragging our entire political system to the right. As Democrats move to the right, if they're the lesser evil, if they're the more left of two parties and they keep moving to the right, you see what happens. The whole system keeps moving to the right. And they've done this since the 90s. And then there's the wokeness wave where suddenly they were less bigited for a decade or so. And the thing is, that's not actual leftism. It is on some level, but it's also just basic humanity. Like, this is human rights on some level. It's not really an economic or political philosophical disagreement. It's just, are you a bigot? Are you a hateful freak for no reason? Or do you want to be more accepting of people being who the fuck they want to be, who the fuck they feel they are, or whatever? I don't know. It's not really your problem though, is it? Like, so this idea that identity politics and things like gay marriage and how people treat trans people is somehow a question between left and right, it's to the degree that it is, it shouldn't be. And to the degree that it is, it also kind of deflects from the big, is used by the Democratic Party to deflect from the economic issue because, you know, they don't have any trans or, you know, gay corporations massively funding them. At the end of the day, these things don't matter for profits. These things don't matter for people making money, which is money is the ruler of our political system. Everything else doesn't matter. It's just cash dollars. And at the end of the day, you know, if they want to put a pride flag on it, put a Trump flag on it, whatever it is, whatever they can do to sell more, that's all corporations care about. So it was easy for Democrats to lean into that. And it was completely painless politically. But at the same time, they used it to deflect from them moving to the right on economics and politics too. And it's dragged our entire society to the right, to the point where, yeah, this whole Handmaid's Tale fucked up dystopia we're building here, this insane idiocracy, 1984 post 1985 shit going on. Yeah, this is largely the fault of the Democratic Party moving to the right. They've built this, they've enabled this over decades, and we've seen it coming, and we're still not even seeing any resistance to it or any acceptance of it. What are we doing?
Future zero.
Gonna have clean coal, really clean coal. A windmill will kill many bald eagles. I don't think science knows, actually.
Story time! Story time. Story time. All right, so I just want to tell this little story because, you know, it's hard for a lot of people, especially decent people, people who haven't had firsthand experience with politicians, to really realize how fucked up politicians are in both parties, but particularly Democrats, particularly for decent liberals who kind of live in a bubble where they see the lesser evil party and they see how crude the Republicans are and openly sociopathic, and they think that Democrats are a contrast. But the reality is, unfortunately, for the most part, they're not. And this took a while for me to kind of accept too. And even now, you know, I still have some kind of internal resistance just knowing some of these people. And you want to assume some kind of basic human decency in at least like some politicians. But so yeah, it was the summer probably of 2017, and the Democratic National Committee was electing a new chair, and they were having their election in Atlanta. And so a little backstory, I was a Bernie delegate. I did a lot trying to help him get elected in 2016. And then after he lost, came back to Georgia and did a lot of work in the party. I was on my county committee for a little while and worked on some elections and different things. Then so when the Democratic National Committee was electing their chair in Atlanta, you know, a lot of us showed up to really lobby for Keith Ellison because he was the progressive. He backed Bernie. He was the more progressive choice by far. He's a decent, down-to-earth guy. Decent for a politician. And, you know, I really don't say that about many of them. Not saying he's perfect or anything, but he's decent for a politician. But he was up against Tom Perez, who was basically an Obama loyalist, an establishment, you know, the guy who would, of course, go on to win. So I had some acquaintance with a lot of the people in the state Democratic Party because how I got elected as a delegate, they had to vote for me, actually. And so the vice chair at the time was Nikema Williams. And who's now a congresswoman for Georgia in John Lewis's old district. At the time, she was a state senator, but she was the vice chair of the party at the time. And so she had a vote in the Democratic National Committee for the chair. And so I went to talk with her to try to get her to vote for Keith. And so I basically gave her the whole, you know, a lot of this, just echoes of this. It's really the same problem, the same reason Democrats failed so badly in this election, where a lot of the things I told her was a lot about ignoring the youth and progressives. And, you know, remember, people really, really downplay it. They act like Bernie Sanders lost to Hillary Clinton by so much. But this was a huge ideological, fundamental split in the Democratic Party in 2016 in their primary. And it wasn't, a lot of people like to say it was some kind of a washout because when Hillary Clinton won. And, you know, if you look at just the superdelegates, it kind of looks like that. Well, it definitely looks like that. But in the actual votes, it was almost 17 million to 13 million. Hillary Clinton won with 16.9 million votes, and Sanders had 13.2 million. Even when a lot of people voted for Hillary because they thought she would be better against Trump, which was a lot of what I heard when I'd call people, Bernie Sanders still almost got 50% of the vote in the primary. And yet it was largely young people and progressives, people with energy knocking doors. We built his campaign from nothing. He started his campaign on like a small stage by a lake in Vermont with Bill McKibben, and no one really paid too much attention, but progressives, leftists at the time, a lot of us who were activists at the time, we immediately jumped up and said, hit the streets, and we made him a viable presidential candidate. It was the grassroots that made him a viable presidential candidate. It wasn't his campaign spending or just him alone. Like, yeah, he brought everything he needed to, but he didn't expect to win. He was kind of running just a campaign because no one else would run against Hillary Clinton. No one in the Democratic parties, and there was no challenge, and she was a very right-wing, let's be real, she's just a piece of shit. She's a fucking horrible person. She's one of the most disliked people in America. Jesus Christ. And so, of course, Democrats nominated her. This was right on the heels of Hillary losing, and Democrats kind of having the same soul-searching moment they're having now, where they're acting like, oh, what happened? And, NPR and all the liberal media organizations are finally giving Bernie Sanders some airtime, saying, oh, Bernie, what did we do wrong? The same kind of thing that's happening now. And so this was the same context where, I was talking to Nikema Williams and I was telling her, look, we had, people were pissed off, and it was, the activists, the people on the ground, the delegates. Yeah. So basically I was saying, like, look, we are going to lose, the party is going to lose all these people, the youth, progressives, the people who energized this campaign, half of the votes in the primary. Like, and you're giving these people nothing. And this is a big part of why Trump won. And they'll blame us when they want to blame us and shame us, just point the finger. But then when it comes time for them to do anything, to meet us in the middle, to compromise, to let progressives have any role in the party at all, it's total war against it. So I was trying to tell her, look, if we could elect Keith Ellison here, this would be a huge olive branch to progressives, to the youth, to all the people who voted for Bernie Sanders, who've got shit on after your whole strategy here, electing Hillary Clinton and these right-wing moderate Democrats, is lost. And, I probably brought up climate change, but for the most part, I just focused on just the strategy and what was really, honestly, what was best for the party if they wanted to beat Republicans. But, silly me, thinking Democrats want to beat Republicans. I was so naive. But yeah, so basically, I was actually, surprised that she did hear me out. She heard me out. She was gracious enough to hear me out, and I was grateful for that. But at the end of the conversation, basically her only response, she didn't try to make any counter argument or anything. She didn't have a rebuttal or anything. Basically, all she said at the end of it, I'm paraphrasing, but basically, I've gotten here. I've gone to all these meetings, elected, done all this stuff over the years to stay involved with the party and to reach this position. So I'm gonna do what I want, what's best for me, I suppose. And just the shameless self-interest. She just had no consideration for it and anything. Didn't give a shit about anything. And that's what these people are. All they care about is their career. A lot of these people literally look at politics like a freaking cash cow. And you see that, especially in the Democratic Party after this election, where they raised $1 billion, end up $20 million in debt and lost. And now they're sending all these emails begging for donations from working class people when they've given how much money to, I think I saw they spent like $100,000 on some set for some talk show or something, or all kinds of insane shit. Apparently the campaign paid artists to paint murals of Kamala in urban areas, which is just the same old Democratic Party strategy where they blanket a lot of poor non-white areas with propaganda, and that does work great in primaries. I mean, that was why Hillary Clinton was primed in 2016 against Bernie Sanders, is because her Democratic Party had been targeting the poor, really, with propaganda. And there's other goofy ways. That I had a friend who was working on her campaign this year who would just go to bars and try to convince people to vote for her. It was really like a multi-level marketing scheme. It was crazy. Like, on some level, they just were so divorced from policy and the reality of what they were trying to do. It became about nothing. And so, of course, Georgia, which flipped blue, as Democrats love to say, for Warnock and Ossoff and Biden in 2020, it went back to Trump very predictably if you live in reality here. So Nikema Williams started catching some flack for that. And because she was the state party chair now, and she's a congresswoman now, and so those conflict. She can only, I guess she can't really fundraise for the party since she's a congresswoman, or it limits her ability. And she basically spent all her time and energy on her own campaign. When she was going to win, then the general election, this is the safest district ever. She didn't have to campaign at all. This is John Lewis's old district. She won with over 85% of the vote. Oh my God. She was going to win. She didn't need to campaign for herself at all. And yet she did, and ignored the Georgia party. And look what happened. So the Georgia Young Democrats actually put out a little press release letter talking about this and calling on her to resign, to step down as the chair of the Georgia Democratic Party. The Georgia Democratic Party has failed to sustainably fund the robust party operation required for Georgia's status as a pivotal swing state. Our state party chair is legally limited in her ability to fundraise for the party because she is a congresswoman. While we appreciate and respect her service, these two roles are not compatible. The Georgia Democratic Party deserves a chair that's primary focus is raising money for the state party and electing Georgia Democrats up and down the ballot. We believe that the current state of affairs does not reflect the values of inclusivity, empowerment, and progress that our party stands for. Oh yeah, and then they go on to say, for several years, the Georgia Young Democrats have been denied funding from the Georgia Democratic Party. In part, this speaks to their failure to raise money on the whole, but it also speaks to their refusal to invest in youth organizing. Boom. This lack of support has had a direct impact on our ability to mobilize young voters, expand our presence in rural areas, and engage with communities that are pivotal to securing a democratic future in Georgia. After thoughtful consideration and in the best interest of our shared goals, we have come to the necessary decision to call for the resignation of Nikema Williams as chairwoman of the Democratic Party of Georgia. In solidarity, Young Democrats of Georgia, College Democrats of Georgia, and Georgia High School Democrats. So, everyone wants to know where the youth vote went. Like... They didn't leave you. Like, bro, you left the youth behind in so many ways, the Democratic Party. And it's wild. And so, on top of that, now, word on the street is that the DNC is thinking of basically bailing her out and promoting her to be vice chair of the DNC so she can get her away from the state party and basically get all this attention off her before it becomes a whole optics issue where people basically realize what's been happening and start to possibly catch on to the systemic issues of the party, because none of this is new, is the thing. This loss has been building since 2015, since what the Democrats did to Bernie Sanders. That was the civil war in the Democratic Party. And guess which side won? It was the Harris, Clinton, Biden, Obama side, the corporations, the big banks, the fossil fuel companies, the billionaires, the media pundits. And who lost? The future, the poor, Palestine, like, the list goes on. It's just backwards world. And so, of course, this March 7th, 6 months into the Gaza genocide, Congresswoman Nikema Williams is there dressed in blue, a cheerleader for Israel.
I wore blue with my colleagues to stand in solidarity with the Israeli hostages. All hostages must be released.
Genocidal scum.
These people all belong in the fucking head, so...
So now it's coming out that a lot of internal polling had Trump winning. Basically Trump winning all the whole time. The internal polling of both candidates, both campaigns, had Trump winning, and by even more with Biden. So I guess they swapped Biden for Harris to try to lose by less. This was insane. This was just like, what was the logic here? This was the most expensive presidential campaign in history, even though they know they'd lose. And they didn't use the opportunity to influence public opinion. They used the opportunity to keep dragging this country to the right, to keep trying to merge the Democrat and Republican Party into one fucked up organism, which they've still done by now. You've got Democrats applauding the appointment of Marco Rubio, and Democrats completely capitulated to this. There's no fight anymore. I mean, remember, this is one of the horrible things about right now is, when Trump won last time, there was all of a sudden the resistance, the pink pussy hat thing going on, and there was a whole public fervor rising up against his agenda. And I don't know if we're going to see that this time, but we're certainly not seeing it now. We're not seeing any of that energy right now. Right now what we're seeing is resignation, Democrats going back to brunch with the middle finger in the air, blaming Jill Stein, blaming anyone but themselves, saying they don't care. You see articles about how black women are giving up and yada yada. And it's like, okay, well, there we go then. Democrats gave up. It's the end of the world party now, motherfucker. So everything's fucked, so let's look at let's just make sure we realize how fucked every fucking thing is. Not only are we here the hottest year on record with the highest, fucking annual emissions, I'm sure, of a fucking year, and the lesser evil party and the greatest empire in the world has normalized genocide and then handed the reins over to the greater evil party. I mean, Democrats have the Biden administration has taken an absolute wrecking ball to the basic foundation of international law and basic human decency. Not even human. I mean, there's other species. It'd be fucked up to pretend that they wouldn't understand the ethics of genocide like we do. Like, holy shit. It's fucking insane. But Democrats had to commit a genocide, and they're still committing it to this day. You know, they haven't done anything. They haven't changed anything. As much as they pretended like Trump was such an existential threat, and then there's, Kamala Harris laughing on Valium and wine through her concession speech. And here's Joe Biden welcoming Donald Trump into the White House with a hearty handshake and a friendly laugh. What the fuck? Like, these people, it's all the big club, right? And at this point, Democrats committed a genocide, completely legal genocide, the most live-streamed war crime series in human history, no question. I mean, there's more evidence for this genocide than anything, than any evil committed in human history, just because of where technology is now and how everything went down and where it went down. So this is all normalized now. And now nothing Trump does. I mean, what can Trump do that's going to be worse than this? You know, if you put your blinders on and just ignore this and everything in any context, what can Trump do that's going to be worse than this? But this means that he can commit genocide now. So what can you do that's really worse than genocide? If you think you're such a fascist, despotic, out of control leader taking charge of our nuclear arsenal. And so what could be worse than like
genocide?
I mean, if we're just going to slaughter all of Palestine like this, wouldn't it even be more ethical to just drop a nuke? Wouldn't it be, it's more like euthanasia than prolonged torture and execution for some like fucked up game show shit. So there's literally nothing Trump can do that can literally be worse, and much less break international law in any other way. And so now basically international law is over. Trump is taking control. Democrats are laughing and smiling. They don't give a fuck. Like, Trump's going to do whatever he wants now. And I don't know. That'll be what it is. I don't know. That's what Democrats have given us. That doesn't even come down to losing the election. That comes down with a Democratic administration for a year committing a genocide in blatant violation of international law. Every red line we drew, we didn't give a shit about. This whole election was 40 days ago. They said, in 30 days, the administration would stop sending arms to Israel if it looked like they were committing war crimes or whatever, some bullshit. I didn't pay attention because we all knew it was bullshit. And then what happened? Now, they lost, and so now it's just forgot all about it. It was a clear election ploy. Like, what do you mean? Stop committing... We'll ask them to stop committing war crimes with the weapons we're sending them a week after you reelect us, if you reelect us. But if you don't, we're going to keep the genocide going till the next administration. What kind of fucked up shit? And then you'll see how fucked up the Democratic Party is. Democratic Party voters even. How are they saying like, oh, well, you got what you wanted. Now Trump's committing the genocide. You'll see them in the comment sections on photo and video of the genocide and saying, well, this is, you voters got what you wanted. This is one. You should have elected Kamala Harris. But she's the vice president. But she's in the administration right now. These people are just psychopaths. And then this whole bragging about like, oh, get deported and shit in the Muslim ban. Democrats like rubbing that in people's faces like with their loss. This is what I was talking about with politics becoming like a sport. Because it's not a sport, dude. These are people's lives. The big problem is on an institutional level, on a systemic level, the Democratic Party cannot learn because it's so incestuous, because at every level its own members vote for its own new members, which is the whole problem they're having with Nikema now. And so that can't stop you from everything. That can't stop candidates on lower levels for the most part, but it can hurt them. They can, if you're running for Congress as a progressive against an establishment Democrat, all the establishment Democrats are going to come against you. They will fight you, but you can still win, but it's just going to be harder. But on a presidential level, it seems like if Bernie Sanders couldn't get in 2016, it doesn't. And everything we've done since then, they are not changing. So in 2016, once I understood, I was a delegate. So once I understood the process, I basically after what they did to Bernie lost and everything, I was like, look, all right, in 2020, what they're going to do is they're going to run as many candidates as possible because of the changes they made to superdelegate voting on the first ballot. Because they wouldn't let superdelegates vote on the first ballot anymore, I said what they're going to do is run as many candidates as possible just to split that vote on the first ballot, and they can consolidate later. And what did they do? There ended up being like 11 candidates. Whereas in 2016, if it was only Hillary Clinton, it would have been Hillary Clinton versus Bernie Sanders. And who was that other guy ran to? Governor of Massachusetts or some shit. So yeah, it was pretty obvious. They're just going to run as many candidates as possible in 2020 just to make sure that Bernie can't get any kind of plurality on the first ballot. Simple as that. And then, of course, we had the pandemic, came and fucked everything up. But, it was the same thing. At the end of the day, there's too many of the members who, it's a cult. It's literally like a cult or a gang. And if you're not in the cult or the gang, and if you really want to challenge their power in any way, which means you want to do something good for this country and good for humanity, and that's going to help the most vulnerable and suffering people and really create a better future for this world, a possible future for this world and this country, defend democracy and all that shit. This gang, this cult is going to become your enemy. And at the end of the day, since their gang cult status makes them the only opposition party to the Republicans in this country, you see this isn't going to work. Like, how do you even fix this? How do you even fix this? I mean, given long enough time, yeah, but we don't have time because of climate change. If we had time, yeah, we don't have time. We don't have any time to even debate any of this shit anymore. We are so out of time. So this whole idea that like, oh yeah, we can spend another 25 years trying to reform the Democratic Party, and that might work. But there's not going to be an America in 25 years like this. No fucking way. So what do we do? I don't know. I have no idea. But there's no chance to get a progressive candidate for the president of the United States with this Democratic Party. They're not going to allow it. And you can see it in their reactions since the election. They're really pushing back against, Bernie Sanders and his little sane letter to America, but there's been a lot of pushback against that. And now they're talking about Rahm Emanuel is going to be running for a DNC chair. Like, holy shit. Holy fucking shit. Why can't he run for the Republican Party chair or something? Like, he'd fit in fine. This is just so bad. Like, the Democratic Party, this system, it's not going to work. We're in a two-party system. Democratic Party is one of those parties, the one that we need to fix things, and it's not going to. And it's not going to give up power. So what do you do? I mean, we obviously have to the Democratic Party needs to end. It has to be dismantled, destroyed, just set on fire, throw it in a lake. That whole machine needs to end. And maybe our whole political system needs. I mean, at this point with the Supreme Court getting locked in and so many judges that Trump's appointing and so much, even the ones that Trump doesn't appoint are pretty right-wing and fucked up. So, I mean, there seems to be no systemic hope for this country in any way. So what do you do then? Americans can't envision a revolution, but this also can't continue forever. This political system, we all know that it can't continue forever, and yet we can't imagine overthrowing it earlier than it just completely collapses, and then we end up in a worst case scenario where we're just at the mercy of gravity and all the falling infrastructure of our political system and society. We don't want to be there, but it's also like, well, we can put it off and live in this comfort, and so it's the same push and pull. I mean, and everyone has to weather the same storm in that way, it seems like, under capitalism, because we won't stick together. When we have no machine, we have no apparatus built up. We've got no real community, no real social support. It's just we're all a bunch of individuals getting beaten by this storm called capitalism. And what do you expect? You got two parties of political grifters, two parties that don't give a shit about anything, and neither of them want to challenge the weather. But at the end of the day, that's what we have to do. And I guess that could be a climate metaphor. I don't fucking know, but that is what we need to do. That's even deeper than climate. This seems like the whole trajectory of life where we've been. driven to these end times where we're just doubling down on fossil fuels no matter what. We call lesser evil is fracking forever. You can't even do that, much less make a moral judgment on it. Our government is broken, and this is the thing: is Trump has really made it work. Trump has delivered on things that Republicans have promised for decades, and Democrats promised other things for decades. And I think they were in kind of a stalemate. Well, they let technology and money do the legwork of reforming everything, corporations, reforming our whole society, and culture, and that shaped our political system that we've come to. And then Trump got a lot of shit done, but Democrats never really have. And of course, it's easier for the right. It's always going to be easier to, for a system, especially the legislature, judiciary, whatever it is, to set its foot down in tradition than it is to, actually start forging a path forward. It's always going to be harder, and especially with the way our system is. Just beating the filibuster to get good legislation across is like fucking impossible under Democrats, apparently. So, and yet Republicans, they're going to get a lot of what they want because our government's resistant from change. We need to learn from this. People learn way too slow, but we know our government is broken. Everyone knows the government is broken, and people want to fix it, even though they don't know what that would look like. But we're going to need radical change just to fix our democracy, radical change to deal with climate change. And so we need to learn from the things that Trump is doing, as much as people want to say, what? He has no idea what he's doing. Maybe he doesn't, but it works. So learn from what works then and what gets done. I mean, he's going to get bad shit done, but it just goes back to the problem is the Democrats won't let their party be a vessel for change. And yet we need change. They have a party of the status quo that fights for the status quo. Joe Biden promising nothing will fundamentally change. And yet we need radical change. And we know this. We said this during that election cycle. This was a crazy thing to say. Like, what do you mean? We need the most radical change in human history. And you're saying nothing will fundamentally change? Please vote for me, billionaires. I got these 2 cheeseburgers, man. I'll suck your dick. So this is what we get. Elon Musk taking the deregulatory hammer to whatever the fuck what is even going on? Like, we live in this weird ass dog cartoon shit is going to be cutting Social Security now. What the fuck kind of psychotic hell world shit is this? But at the end of the day, if they can get shit done, like, we need to learn how to get good shit done. They get bad shit done. We need to learn those lessons. How the fuck did they achieve that and not say, well, let's get along with it. Get your money, get your bag, get your career locked in. I mean, Nakeem is not worried about this shit. Do you think Nakeem is crying over Trump winning? Nakeem Williams? Do you think any of the Democratic leadership is really cares? I mean, Kamala looked a little bit sad, but she also looked high as fuck in her concession speech. Joe Biden was just, he was in his one weird fucking zombie mode shit, but he was all smiling, laughing, shaking hands with Trump. Greatest threat ever, and yet he's on his way out. And what are they doing? Like, this is part of, they're so unserious. What are they doing? They could be doing everything they could to fight Trump, to safeguard the democracy from him, to deal with climate change, declare a climate emergency. I mean, there are all kinds of things they could do to do anything, even give Trump something to undo, give Trump something to do to undo, just to spin his tires when he gets into office. Anything. Try anything. Fuck, dude. Do something. They're still genociding in Gaza. I mean, you could drop a in Tel Aviv. Technically, I think with these new powers where they can't really be found personally, criminally liable as a president for anything they do in office. I mean, couldn't he drone strike Trump as a national security threat? I think he could just drone strike Trump. I mean, if he's such a fascist existential threat to American democracy, why would you not do that? I mean, even Osama bin Laden wasn't a threat like that, and yet no one has any problem murdering him. So it doesn't make any sense. They could all of Israel's nuclear facilities right now. He's got another month or so, right? So another month and a half. But what's he gonna do? Is he even alive? Is anyone in there? I just want someone put a microphone up next to his skull and then just tap on it a few times and see what kind of echo we get. And it's sad. I don't mean to keep making fun of this old man but like, look, dude, you're a fucking ambitious fucking piece of shit. You are a piece of shit, Joe Biden. You were a piece of shit when you had your full functioning brain. When you were my age, you were a piece of shit. When you were 20 years old, you were a piece of shit. 20 years later, you were a piece of shit. 20 years later, you're still a piece of shit. Fuck you. Like, you shouldn't be in here, dude. You fucked over so many better worlds we could have fucking had by taking this nomination. So you expect any sympathy from anyone who actually gives a shit? Fuck you, dude. You literally couldn't have died soon enough, dude. No, you didn't. You didn't die soon enough. You couldn't have done that for the world. Couldn't have just fucking died in goddamn 2020. Fuck you, man. So yeah, now you all know why the End of the World Party exists. It's because this is the end of the world. I mean, if humanity has a last chance, this is it. And so what are the good people doing? What are the leftists and the environmentalists doing? What are the doomers doing? The people who really have been right this whole time and understand so much. What are they doing? Jacking off online, dude. It's fucking circle jerk, right? Falling prey to the capitalist algorithm. Like, look, we can't do this. We literally can't do this. Like, leftists, you're my homies, I guess. I know you hate me and you're not going to listen to me. I just want to speak to the leftists real quick. Not that you'll ever listen to me, and then, you know, the left hates the left. That's just how it is. The left will never respect or listen to the left because that's what we are. We are the circular firing squad. So, what's the point? I don't know. The point is, if humanity has the last chance, this is it. Like, you can go be right on social media all you fucking want. It's not gonna matter. What we do with this moment is all that matters. Because look, if Harris won, we wouldn't be able to do anything right now. This would be a total legitimization of what the Democratic Party ran as and what they became, of swing to the right. Basically just of the Democratic Party becoming the Republican Party. But we were proven right. And are we gonna let this moment go by? Are we going to let the Democrats on cable fucking capitalize on this and propel their careers to new heights and our democracy to new depths and doom our world just a little bit more like it needs it? Or are we going to fucking think, do something, lead, get organized? It's time for us to just stop talking shit about the past failures of the Democratic Party and figure out what we can learn from them, and then stop making everything about like individuals and just people. You know, a lot of the pieces of shit at the top, yeah, okay, just write them off. That's one thing. But Rahm Emanuel, yeah, fuck him. Jamie Harrison, all these fucking people, scumbags. Harris, Biden, Obama, the Clintons, all can go to the fucking Hague, to fucking hell. But I'm talking about, you know, the average voters. We've got to treat people, we've just got to get smarter with how we look at humanity. And stop attributing everything to the individuals and start looking at the systems and the systems that we're a part of, and looking at individuals as pieces in those systems, determined mini systems inside systems. And at the end of the day, we have to do more than just be self-righteous on social media. As much as rewarding as it might be, as easy as it is, as much as sometimes it seems like, what else can you even do? Like, there's not, you know, join the DSA, join the Democratic Party, you go to a protest. Like, well, I don't know, maybe you should do all that, but just don't, whatever you do, don't sell an ounce of, don't give an inch. Don't give an inch of what's right and what's true, because that's why the left doesn't trust those institutions, because people get into them and they get locked in. They see a career, they see a new kind of social order they can find their place in, and they stay, they get comfortable. And that is the last thing we need right now. Anyone being comfortable. I mean, the Democratic Party needs to be criticized literally into oblivion. It probably needs to be absolutely dismantled and destroyed at every level. But it's also going to take like real work to save the world or salvage the end of this world, so we don't go extinct in just a blaze of fascism and genocide and the most extreme, unimaginable horror movie injustices that the human mind can possibly conceive of, which seems to be the path we're on right now. Like, look, yeah, we're probably not going to make it as a species. It's probably too late. I mean, you don't want to go vegan, do you? Like, no, you don't. So, like, you're not going to deal with global warming. We're probably going to go extinct. But there's still the how do we go extinct question that is what we're going to be answering. That's what humanity is going to be answering for the end of its days, is how do we go extinct? And I think we're at the point where some of us see we are going. And I mean, we've been talking about it. And if you're listening, you probably have an inkling. But we are not going to make it as a species. Look at us. What have we learned? We've learned how to be more ignorant. That's all we've learned as a species. You know, we've learned enough to destroy the planet, and unlearned enough to remain ignorant enough to finish the job of destroying it. Because that's best for us as individual apes. We can all be comfortable. We can all get our career. We can all get our checks from this fucked up machine. Doesn't matter what you think of it. You know, put in your time, get your check, and fuck the future. I don't know. Just vote for the End of the World Party next time. Fuck. I don't know. Came here for answers? No, we're fucked. That's the only answer. It's a new world, folks. The old world is dead. Not just dying. The old world is dead. A new world is struggling to not die too. And 1,000 others after that. I don't know. So what do? Get drunk. Do yoga. Meditate. Go walk in the woods. Then been telling people ever since the election, people have been all up in their minds and emotions and anxieties over this. Just come go in the woods. Go walk in the woods. Go for a walk in the woods. Is that going to fix America's political system? No, but yeah, maybe.
America's children live in a terrifying, meaningless existence. There is no hope, no happiness. That changes right here, right now. From this moment onward, the children of this great nation are its highest priority.